Welcome. This is a video that is intended to provide an overview of the newest draft of the Subdivision Ordinance for Monongalia County, West Virginia. You may recall that a draft was proposed in early spring, and a copy of that draft has been posted on the Monongalia Planning Commission website since March. We have updated that draft, listening to feedback from the public and developers to make it clearer and easier to follow. This is an overview, principally, of that work. So why did we change what we did in March? Since the county was principally using incentives to encourage better design, that was mostly based on more units and less cost per unit to entice quality development. Unfortunately, with COVID, development pressures have lessened greatly. Consequently, the extra unit incentives were no longer as attractive to developers. Though there were time incentives, the end effect was not significant enough based on the steps of the review process to act as a strong inducement to do better development. Thus, we worked on the process to make it easier to do new development, especially for preferred design, designing to suit the process of those who develop subdivisions that meet or exceed the standards of good development types. As a reminder of the incentives to encourage this better, or what we call preferred design, there are advantages for both developers and the county. For developers, they are offered more units and less required infrastructure per unit. There are also large time advantages for the expedited review offered for subdivisions that meet preferred design, as well as being easier to approve with less rework, as they would be using designs and templates that the MCPC would be familiar with. For the county, we get better, safer connected roads, less sprawl and its associated costs, easier reviews and review time. The actual buildings would be better due to wiser use of land. What has happened since March? Again, what we were regulating has stayed the same. How we regulate has improved. We've reorganized the ordinance in a more logical sequence of regulations, which makes it clearer and easier to follow. The ease of applying and the timelines for submission works better with how subdivisions are designed and engineered, saving money and headaches. We base this on how good developments were executed, talking with the engineers that worked on those projects. We improved the incentives and added more examples of good development and development techniques. We also made corrections and disambiguated terms. We had used terms like minor and major in many different contexts. That is no longer the case. One final note, we closed a loophole that allowed a large development with public infrastructure, but one that remains unsubdivided, to still make sure the public is allowed to review the public infrastructure before approval. As to the reorganization, as you can see, the number of articles and their arrangement are much easier to follow. For instance, before, we discussed the different types of subdivision in Article 5 after we'd already discussed exempt and minor subdivisions in Articles 3 and 4. In the new version, we moved the subdivision classification article to Article 3 before we discussed the different types of subdivision. Did anything else change? We added tables for ease of use. For instance, we now have a master table listing all submission requirements rather than leaving an applicant to go back and forth in the ordinance. We improved the submission schedule rather than automatically requiring everything up front. Also, we added language to more specifically enable broadband, something the county keenly felt the need of during COVID. We also added definitions that were either missing or needed extra nuance. Anything else change? Interestingly, the reorganization actually allowed us to cut about 20% of the document's length, since we no longer needed as much wayfinding and repetition. It also made the accompanying guideline toolkit easier to write now. Finally, has anything else changed? Early in 2020, prior to COVID, when the county reviewed the ordinance with some engineers and developers one-on-one, the regulations did not seem as hard to follow as at first blush. So the county had originally hoped to have had in-person workshops. With COVID, that no longer seems easy to do, so the county is posting a series of how-to videos to help everyone understand better how to use the ordinance. This is one of those videos. If at any time anyone has a question or comment, we have included our contact information at the bottom of the slide.